Usually when we talk about a venture capitalist managing a cap table, there's this expectation of extreme, almost ruthless precision.
Oh, absolutely, down to the decimal point.
Right. You'd never, ever just give away like 5% of your company's equity to some random person who walked into your office with a quick question.
You'd call security. Or your lawyers.
Exactly. You'd guard that equity with your life, negotiate for weeks. But then you look at how those exact same founders, those same executives, manage their daily calendar.
It's completely wild.
It is. They are practically handing out 5% of their day to every single random Slack message or, unstructured meeting that pops up. It's just a total disconnect.
It's a massive disconnect, yeah. And honestly, it represents an absolute crisis in resource allocation for these companies.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
So our mission today is to extract the ultimate blueprint for structuring your day, optimizing execution, and really preventing the kind of systemic burnout that actively kills companies.
Which happens a lot more than people want to admit.
Right. We're looking at the rigorous operational frameworks established by StartupLanes, specifically the work of Dr. Shishir Gupta, to figure out how to treat time not as some, abstract concept, but as a hard economic resource.
Yeah. Because treating it like a hard economic resource is really the only way a startup survives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what the data across the StartupLanes ecosystem consistently shows is something VCs know, but rarely say out loud.
Which is what?
Startups rarely run out of money before the leadership runs out of clear, focused execution capacity.
Oh, wow. So it's not always just a cash flow problem.
Not at all. I mean, when a company goes under, the postmortem always blames market fit or the macroeconomic environment.
Always, or some competitor that swooped in.
Exactly. But frequently, the root cause, the actual internal operational failure, stems directly from poor personal resource management and just some catastrophic decision fatigue at the top.
That makes so much sense. I mean, in business, we universally accept that you cannot create net new market demand out of thin air, right?
Right. If a market doesn't exist, you can't just will it into existence. You have to displace existing demand from somewhere else.
But for some reason, highly intelligent people trick themselves into believing they can manufacture net new time.
They really do. They think, if I just push harder, I can squeeze a 25th hour out of this Tuesday.
And you just can't.
You can't. Which is why, before we even get into building the perfect calendar or tactical time blocking, we have to look at the biological hardware we're running on.
Because the most beautifully color-coded Google Calendar is useless if your brain is fried.
Exactly. It's totally useless if you don't understand how your brain metabolizes energy. So let's start with this concept of demand displacement applied internally.
Okay, so if we can't make more time, how do we displace the demand on our time?
Well, applied internally, demand displacement means recognizing that you have a strictly finite reserve of mental energy every single day.
Right.
In the StartupLanes Framework, this is called decision capital.
Decision capital. I like that term. Like a physical battery.
Yeah, exactly, like a physical battery. Or, honestly, better yet, think of it as a daily allowance of tokens.
Okay, tokens.
Every single choice you make, from the intensely complex to the utterly trivial, costs a token.
So wait, if I'm standing in my kitchen at 7 a.m., agonizing over whether to make eggs or oatmeal or what shirt to wear.
That costs a token.
Really? The mechanism in my brain doesn't differentiate between that choice and the choice of whether to fire an underperforming executive at 2 p.m.
Biologically, no. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and impulse control, does not heavily discriminate between the weight of those decisions.
That is wild.
It uses the exact same metabolic resources, glucose and oxygen, to process those choices.
Which explains the Steve Jobs thing.
Exactly. This is why Steve Jobs famously wore the exact same black turtleneck and jeans every single day.
Right. It wasn't just this, quirky branding play to look like a visionary.
Not at all. He was building a structural defense mechanism. He was rigorously hoarding his decision capital.
Because every decision degrades your decision quality for the rest of the day.
Precisely. If you burn your tokens in the morning deciding what to wear, or, troubleshooting some minor billing software issue because you wouldn't delegate it,
you're actively draining the battery.
You are. And by the time you sit down in the afternoon to structure a multi-million-dollar equity deal, your prefrontal cortex is depleted.
And what happens then?
The result is totally predictable. You'll either experience operational paralysis, where you just defer the decision because it feels too hard, Or,
Or you just guess.
worse, you become dangerously impulsive just to get the cognitive load off your desk.
Oh, wow. That impulsivity is terrifying when you're making decisions that affect a whole company.
It's how empires fall, honestly.
But it's not just a slow, steady drain from 100% to zero, right? The source material talks about how this degradation is tied to biological energy peaks.
Yes, human cognitive output is absolutely not a flat line across a 24-hour cycle. It's highly undulating.
Based on chronotypes, right?
Right. Your periods of peak executive function are dictated primarily by two biological markers: your core body temperature and your cortisol levels.
Now, cortisol usually gets a bad rap as just the stress hormone.
It does, but it's also your waking hormone. It drives alertness. When cortisol spikes and your core temperature rises, you hit a biological peak.
So that's the golden window.
That is your window of maximum capacity for analytical problem solving, lateral thinking, deep creative output, all of it.
But that spike doesn't happen at 9 a.m. for everyone, obviously.
No, not at all. If you're a night owl chronotype, your internal circadian peak might not hit until like 4 p.m. or even later.
Right, whereas a morning lark might hit their peak at 7:30 a.m. and be practically useless for complex thought by mid-afternoon.
Precisely. And this is where modern corporate scheduling completely fails founders and their teams.
Because we forced everyone into this 9 to 5 box.
Exactly. If you force a night owl senior engineer to architect your core database at 8:30 a.m., because that's when the company officially starts working,
You're ruining their output.
you're actively sabotaging their high-conviction decision output. You're forcing them to perform their most critical work when their biological voltage is at its absolute lowest.
It's like trying to run a high-end video rendering software on a laptop that's stuck in battery saver mode.
That's a great analogy.
It's going to lag, it's going to stutter, and it might just crash completely.
Right. Effective routines don't try to force a uniform factory-era schedule across diverse cognitive profiles.
So the real danger is wasting that peak window.
That's the fatal error. Taking your personal peak biological window, whenever that is, and wasting it on low-conviction tasks.
Like email.
Exactly. If you use your peak cortisol window to clear out your inbox or approve expense reports, you are taking your most valuable economic resource and literally setting it on fire.
Which naturally leads us to the problem of categorization. If our peak energy is this fleeting, highly limited resource, how do we systematically separate the vital work from the noise?
The StartupLanes Framework breaks this down into a strict matrix: deep work versus shallow work.
And it prescribes a very specific budget, right? 60% deep work, 40% shallow work.
That 60-40 split is the operational core of the founder time allocation matrix.
Okay, let's define the parameters for the listener. What goes into the 60%?
Deep work is high leverage, it is asynchronous, and it requires a minimum of 90-minute blocks of uninterrupted focus.
90 minutes. No checking phones.
None. This is the work that actually creates structural business value and defensible IP. Writing core software architecture, drafting complex legal frameworks, financial modeling.
The heavy lifting.
The heavy lifting.
Yeah, what about the 40% shallow work? Because I have to admit, 40% seems almost too high.
You think so?
Well, shouldn't a hyper-efficient founder be like delegating all the shallow work and spending 90% of their time in deep work?
In a utopian scenario, sure. But this framework is grounded in the messy reality of actually running an enterprise.
Okay, fair enough. So what is shallow work then?
Shallow work encompasses synchronous, context switch-heavy, reactive operational maintenance.
So answering unstructured Slack messages.
Right, sitting in routine status update meetings, basic calendar management, clearing inboxes. You can't delegate all of it.
Because part of your job as a leader is just unblocking your team.
Exactly. If you refuse to do any shallow work, your team stalls out waiting for your approval on basic operational items. The 40% is a realistic cap to keep the lights on without letting the noise consume the signal.
Let's talk about the friction between these two types of work. Because the real danger isn't just doing too much shallow work, is it?
No, the real danger is trying to mix them together.
Oh man, we all know that feeling. Trying to write a complex strategy document while keeping one eye on the Slack notifications popping up in the corner of the screen.
That mixing is what we call reactive operational management, and it is lethal.
Lethal.
Totally. Reactive management means your schedule is dictated by external inbound requests. Whoever messages you first dictates what your brain focuses on.
Your workday just gets fragmented into these like 15-minute intervals of panic.
And the cognitive penalty for that fragmentation is Massive.
To use a computer analogy, think of deep work like loading a massive, heavy piece of software into your brain's RAM, like a complex 3D modeling program.
Right. It takes time to load all those files.
Exactly, to hold all those variables in your working memory.
Yeah.
When you suddenly switch over to answer a Slack message, your brain has to dump the 3D software out of the RAM, load up the messaging context, process the message, dump that, and then try to reload the massive 3D modeling software from scratch.
And just like a computer, every time you force your brain to dump and reload that heavy cognitive context, the CPU overheats.
The battery just drains rapidly.
That cognitive friction is what exhausts your decision capital long before the workday is actually over.
Wow.
You aren't just losing the 3 minutes it took to answer the message. You're losing the 20 minutes it takes to re-achieve the flow state you were in. Plus, you're permanently burning a portion of your daily energy reserves.
Dr. Shishir Gupta states this perfectly in the material. He says, the fastest way to kill a venture is to let shallow operational noise displace deep strategic focus.
It is the single most common failure mode for early-stage founders. They mistake motion for progress.
Okay, so we understand the biology. We know we need to prioritize deep work and isolate it. But the transition from theory to practice is where most people fail.
It's where the wheels come off, yeah.
Because exactly when and for how long should a founder actually be working?
That's the million-dollar question.
If you look at startup culture,
Yeah.
the prevailing narrative is, if you aren't working 100 hours a week, sleeping under your desk and mainlining espresso, you just don't want it badly enough.
Which is complete nonsense. And the StartupLanes Framework has a literal mathematical equation called the hours formula that completely upends this.
Right. It treats time allocation with the exact same quantitative rigor as capital deployment. Walk us through that math.
The hours formula calculates your optimal daily work hours. It is a baseline of 6 hours plus a stage weight minus a leverage index.
Okay, let's break that down. What is the stage weight?
The stage weight accounts for the reality that a company's demands on a founder change as it matures.
Makes sense.
So if you're in stage 0 pre-revenue, hunting for product market fit, likely building the MVP yourself, your execution burden is at its absolute highest.
So what's the math there?
You add 2.5 hours to the baseline. Your target is 8.5 hours of highly focused work a day.
Okay, 8.5 hours. That's still nowhere near the 16-hour days we're told to idolize.
Right. Now, if you are in stage 1, you have early traction, you've launched, you have some revenue, you add 1.5 hours to the baseline, giving you a target of 7.5 hours.
And what if you reach stage 2, like scale and maturity?
At stage 2, where the machine is essentially built and running, you add 0. You stay at the 6-hour baseline.
Only 6 hours.
Yes. Because at stage 2, your focus must shift entirely from direct, hands-on execution to high-level capital allocation, strategic hiring, and culture building.
You're managing the system, not turning the wrenches.
Exactly. And then we subtract hours based on the leverage index.
Which represents your team infrastructure.
Right. If it's just you and a co-founder, you have no leverage, so you subtract 0. But if you have a core team of 3 to 10 reliable individual contributors, you subtract half an hour.
Because basic delegation reduces your direct burden.
Exactly. And if you have layered leadership department heads, a COO, seasoned VP level management, you subtract 1.5 hours.
Wow.
At that point, your primary job isn't doing the work. Your job is removing blockers so your team can do the work.
So let's look at the extremes. A solo founder at stage 0 is at 8.5 hours. A stage 2 founder with an executive team is working roughly 4.5 to 6 hours.
Correct.
Let's be brutally honest here. If I'm a founder listening to this and I see my competitors loudly bragging on LinkedIn about their 100-hour work weeks, aiming for 6 to 9 hours feels like I'm voluntarily surrendering.
It feels lazy to them.
Exactly. Feels lazy. Can you actually build a unicorn working 8 hours a day?
Not only can you, but it is mathematically the only sustainable way to do it over a multi-year time horizon.
Explain that. Because people are going to fight you on this.
We have to look at the law of diminishing decision quality. We just established that your decision capital is finite. Neurochemically, human cognitive bandwidth only allows for roughly 3 to 4 hours of elite high-level problem-solving per day.
True deep work.
Yes, true deep work. The brain simply cannot sustain the metabolic demands of that flow state for longer than that.
So what are people actually doing during hours 10, 11, and 12 of their 100-hour hustle?
They're doing low-leverage, shallow work, but they're doing it very slowly and with an incredibly high error rate.
Because they're fried.
Exactly. After roughly 9 hours of total cognitive exertion, error rates and strategic thinking don't just creep up, they spike
The
dramatically.
battery is dead.
The prefrontal cortex is exhausted, the amygdala, the emotion center, takes over, and you become highly reactive.
So the danger isn't just that you're being inefficient in hour 12. The danger is that you are actively destroying value.
Precisely. The 100-hour hustle myth assumes all hours are created equal. They're fundamentally not.
An hour at 8 a.m. is not the same as an hour at 10 p.m.
Not even close. A single exhausted, impulsive strategic error made in hour 12, like agreeing to a punitive liquidation preference in a term sheet because you're too tired to model out the downside.
Oh man, that's a nightmare scenario.
Or snapping at your lead engineer and destroying a year of hard-earned trust. That can cost you months of runway to repair.
Just because you wanted to feel productive at midnight?
Exactly. So to protect those 6 to 9 vital hours, the StartupLanes 24-hour architecture divides the founder's day into 4 strict, non-negotiable zones.
Let's explore those zones. Because the friction of transitioning between different types of work is what usually breaks a schedule.
Okay, zone 1 is prime cognition. This is a block of 2.5 to 3 hours, placed precisely during your biological peak.
So for a morning lark, this might be 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Right. And the operational mode here is absolute uncompromising isolation.
Airplane mode on the phone.
Airplane mode, Slack is closed, no email tabs open, no quick questions from the team.
The ultimate VIP room.
Yes. This zone is reserved exclusively for high-leverage product design, financial modeling, or pitch deck preparation.
The real needle-moving stuff.
Exactly. The absolute rule of Zone 1 is this. If a meteor hits the Earth at noon and you accomplish nothing else for the rest of the day, finishing Zone 1 guarantees that the company still move forward strategically.
I think the psychological relief of that is massive.
It changes everything.
Because if you nail Zone 1, you've already won the day.
Yeah.
The anxiety of, am I doing enough, just evaporates.
Exactly. You can breathe.
So once we exit prime cognition, how do we handle the rest of the business?
You transition into Zone 2, operational steering. This is 2 to 3 hours, usually midday. Now you shift from maker mode into manager mode.
So this is where we talk to people.
This is entirely synchronous communication. You
Right.
run your 15-minute daily stand-ups, you do your one-on-one syncs with direct reports, you take strategic client calls.
Wait, you batch all those meetings back to back? Doesn't that cause major meeting fatigue?
It causes a specific type of fatigue, yeah. But it is vastly superior to the alternative, which is having those meetings peppered throughout your entire day, destroying any chance of unbroken focus.
Ah, I see.
By batching them into a single 3-hour window, you contain the damage. You're steering the ship, unblocking the team, and then you get out.
Got it. So strategy is locked in, the team is unblocked and aligned. We're moving into the late afternoon. What happens in Zone 3?
Zone 3 is asynchronous triage. This is 1 to 1.5 hours. At this point, your decision capital is heavily depleted. Your prefrontal cortex is low on glucose.
So no heavy lifting.
Exactly. So you shift to low cognition processing. You're in pure admin mode.
This is the shallow work.
Yes. You clear your inbox, you approve routine finances, you sign standardized documents, and crucially,
Yeah.
you set your top 3 priorities for the next day so you don't waste tomorrow morning's energy deciding what to do.
That is such a good hack. Don't waste tomorrow's tokens on planning.
Exactly. The strict rule of Zone 3 is that you're only processing incoming requests. You are specifically not originating new, complex initiatives during this zone because your judgment is compromised.
And that leaves Zone 4, which technically covers the vast majority of our lives.
Zone 4 is sharp brain recovery. It's the remaining 16.5 hours of the 24-hour cycle.
And this is strictly off the clock.
Strictly off the clock, it requires 7 to 8 hours of non-negotiable sleep, which we'll discuss the biology of shortly.
What else goes in there?
It includes 45 to 60 minutes of physical movement to actively flush cortisol from the bloodstream. And it requires a total shutdown of work-related communications at least 2 hours before sleep.
To allow the nervous system to downregulate.
Exactly. You have to let the engine cool down.
The architecture makes total sense. But let's deal with the reality of implementation. I know exactly what a founder is thinking right now.
It'll never work for me.
Right. This sounds great, but when I open my laptop, I have 40 open Jira tickets, 200 unread emails, and a massive backlog of features to build. The sheer volume of incoming tasks is going to overwhelm this beautiful 4-zone system instantly.
It's a valid fear, which is exactly why we need master frameworks for execution. The 4 zones tell you when to work, but you need tactical systems to filter what enters those zones.
Okay, let's get tactical.
Let's start with the top of the funnel filter, the Eisenhower matrix.
Most people have seen this, the 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance. But I find founders almost universally misuse it.
They absolutely do. The matrix forces you to categorize every incoming task. Urgent and important tasks, like a server crash or an investor demanding a revised term sheet today, you have to do immediately.
Right.
Urgent but not important tasks, like a vendor needing a signature or a routine team dispute, you must delegate.
And not urgent and not important tasks, like aimless networking coffees or browsing industry gossip.
You delete those entirely.
And the final quadrant, important but not urgent.
That is the schedule quadrant, and it's the founder sweet spot. This is the deep strategic planning, the long-term architectural design.
The stuff that actually builds the company.
Exactly. This is the work that goes into zone 1.
The biggest failure mode I see with the Eisenhower matrix is driven by founder anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
When a founder is stressed, their amygdala is firing, and their threat detection system goes haywire. Suddenly, everything looks urgent and important.
Everything feels like a fire.
A minor bug in the UI. Urgent. A delayed response from a mid-level candidate. Urgent. They misclassify every task into the do immediately quadrant, effectively bypassing the filter entirely.
And returning right back to chaotic firefighting. Exactly. The discipline of the Eisenhower matrix isn't drawing the 4 boxes on a whiteboard.
It's the emotional regulation.
It's having the emotional regulation to look at a screaming urgent issue and calmly say, this is urgent, but it is not important to our core enterprise value. I am delegating this.
So once we've filtered the tasks and we know what actually deserves our attention, how do we manage the flow of that work?
Let's talk about Kanban boards, because again, I think everyone assumes they know what this is.
Just a digital board with to-do, doing, and done columns? Right.
If you are only using Kanban as a visual list of chores, you're entirely missing the point of the system.
Okay, what's the real mechanism then?
The critical mechanism of Kanban that prevents burnout and cognitive overload is the strict enforcement of work-in-progress limits, or WIP limits.
Explain how a WIP limit physically protects a founder's brain.
A WIP limit dictates that you can only have a highly restricted number of tasks, say a maximum of 3 in the in-progress column at any given time.
Only 3.
Only 3. If you have 3 active tasks, you are physically forbidden from pulling a 4th task from the to-do backlog into your active workflow, no matter how urgent it feels.
You have to finish something first.
You must finish an active task and move it to done before you can start a new one.
Because if you don't enforce that limit, what actually happens?
We see the catastrophic failure mode that plagues software teams. Without WIP limits, the in-progress column swells to 15, 20, or 30 stalled tickets.
It just becomes a graveyard of half-finished ideas.
Exactly. A developer starts a task, hits a minor roadblock, leaves it in progress, and pulls a new task to feel productive. Now they're context switching between 20 half-finished projects.
We talked about the RAM analogy earlier. Their brain is trying to keep 20 massive software files open simultaneously.
And that completely destroys cycle times.
Cycle time being the time it takes to actually finish the thing.
Yes. Cycle time is the total time it takes for a task to move from the moment work begins to the moment it is completely finished and delivering value.
Right.
If you have 20 things in progress, your context switching friction is so high that your cycle time approaches infinity. Nothing ever gets finished.
Strict WIP limits force you to push tasks across the finish line.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've filtered with Eisenhower. We've managed the workflow with Kanban WIP limits. Now, how do we physically sit in the chair and execute?
Right, the tactical execution.
The default answer in productivity circles is the Pomodoro technique, right? Work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. But applying Pomodoro to deep work seems fundamentally flawed.
It is entirely flawed for deep execution. The standard 25-5 Pomodoro rhythm is a fantastic tool for Zone 3 asynchronous triage.
Because it helps with the boring stuff.
Right. It lowers the psychological friction of getting started on annoying, shallow admin tasks. You can tell yourself, I only have to process emails for 25 minutes.
But for Zone 1?
For Zone 1 prime cognition, human attention cycles naturally follow ultradian rhythms.
What is the mechanism behind an ultradian rhythm?
It's a natural biological cycle of brainwave activity. It typically consists of roughly 90 minutes of high-frequency, intense beta wave brain activity,
Followed by a break.
followed by a necessary 20-minute biological recovery period where the brain needs to transition to slower alpha waves to consolidate information and clear metabolic waste.
So if I'm a founder deeply submerged in a flow state, architecting a complex database structure, it might take me 20 minutes just to load all those variables into my working memory.
Exactly. And if you are using a Pomodoro timer, right when you achieve maximum cognitive loading at minute 25, an alarm goes off and forces you to stop and take a 5-minute break.
You've just artificially interrupted your own flow state.
It is disastrous. When you sit back down 5 minutes later, you have to spend massive amounts of cognitive energy reloading that entire mental architecture.
So you use the 90-minute blocks instead.
You use 90-minute ultradian blocks to ride the wave of deep focus to its natural biological conclusion, and then you take a genuine 20-minute break away from all screens to recover.
All right, we have the biology, the zones, the frameworks, but let's address the elephant in the room: entropy.
Oh yes, the inevitable decay.
Even the most perfectly designed systems degrade over time. You can set up this immaculate 4-zone calendar on Sunday night with perfect ultradian blocks and strict WIP limits, and by Thursday morning, it's a chaotic, double-book mess of emergencies.
It happens to everyone.
How do we defend this architecture week over week?
Systems require active maintenance, or they collapse into chaos. The StartupLanes Framework prescribes 3 specific weekly audits to ruthlessly maintain the integrity of your boundaries.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the budgeted line test.
How does that work in practice?
You sit down at the end of the week, look at every single scheduled meeting and work block you participated in, and you ask one binary question.
Which is?
What exact enterprise milestone did this hour directly support?
Oof. That's a tough mirror to look into.
It is, because if the answer is vague, like, oh, it was a good alignment sync, or we just touched base, that recurring meeting gets cut or drastically reduced. You must defend every hour.
The second audit deals directly with the friction we discussed earlier, right?
Yes, the context switching audit. You look back specifically at your Zone 1 deep work blocks and ask, how many times was my focus broken by real-time messaging, unannounced phone calls, or someone knocking on my door?
This audit is painful because it reveals exactly where your boundaries are failing.
Exactly. If your 90-minute block was interrupted 4 times, it wasn't a deep work block. It was 4 fragmented, shallow sessions.
Which usually leads to the realization that you are the bottleneck. Which brings us to the third audit.
The founder delegation audit. For every single task you completed that week, you ask, could this have been handled by a standardized operating procedure or a team member?
And if the answer is yes,
If the answer is yes, you are hoarding control and failing to empower your team. You have to free yourself to make the high-conviction decisions only the founder can make.
now implementing these audits requires breaking some very deeply ingrained corporate habits. I want to talk about the psychological difficulty of giving up control.
It's the hardest part for most founders.
Because there is one highly specific piece of advice in the StartupLanes operational upgrade list that I think will terrify most founders.
Which one are you thinking of?
The directive to permanently eradicate the open door policy.
Ah, yes. The sacred cow.
The framework says that having an open door policy all day is an obsolete habit, and it must be replaced with protected office hours. I can hear the objections now. If I lock my door, my team will feel unsupported. I'll seem aloof. A good leader is always available to help their team.
It's a very common, very visceral fear. But it stems from a total misunderstanding of leadership dynamics. We have to view this through the lens of situational leadership theory.
Unpack that for us. What is the core mechanism of situational leadership?
Situational leadership dictates that a leader must adapt their management style based on the specific competence and commitment level of the employee they are managing.
Okay.
If you have a brand new junior employee, they need high direction, step-by-step guidance. But if you have a highly competent, experienced veteran, they need low direction and high autonomy.
So how does an open door policy violate that?
Because an open door policy applies a high direction, constant availability environment to everyone universally.
Oh, I see.
If your door is always open and you instantly answer every Slack message, you train your entire team, even your veterans, to rely on you for every minor operational hiccup.
You literally condition them to stop solving problems themselves because it's easier to just ask you.
Exactly. You create learned helplessness.
You become the ultimate bottleneck, crippling their autonomy.
Furthermore, by constantly jumping in to solve problems for your high-performing veterans, you are effectively micromanaging them.
And veterans hate being micromanaged.
The data is overwhelmingly clear. Micromanaging highly competent people destroys their morale and is the fastest way to cause top talent to resign.
That completely flips the narrative. By protecting your deep work blocks and moving to specific structured office hours, say, you're only available for impromptu questions between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. You aren't hiding from your team.
Not at all.
You are intentionally building a resilient system that doesn't instantly collapse if you look away for 90 minutes.
Precisely. Shifting away from constant live availability to asynchronous updates like written daily stand-ups empowers your team to execute independently while simultaneously safeguarding your executive focus.
To prove that these rigid boundaries aren't just theoretical but actually create massive enterprise valuation, let's look at how the most successful builders in the world structure their time.
Let's do it.
Because the reality is, the billionaires aren't working 100 hours a week either. They are fiercely protecting their prime cognition. Let's look at Jeff Bezos during the core scaling years of Amazon.
Bezos is a perfect case study in understanding biological peaks. He engineered his entire schedule around his chronotype.
How so?
He aligned all of his high-stakes, cognitively demanding meetings where massive capital allocation or strategic pivots were decided, strictly between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.
Just a 2-hour window for the most important decisions at one of the largest companies on Earth.
Yes. He recognized that his prefrontal cortex peaked during that window. He famously stated that if he made just 3 high-quality decisions a day, that was enough.
3 decisions.
3. He would not make high-stakes decisions in the late afternoon. If an issue came up at 4 p.m., he would explicitly defer it to 10 a.m. the next day. He was ruthlessly hoarding and protecting his decision capital.
That is the antithesis of the reactive founder, who is frantically answering emails at midnight to feel productive. 3 good decisions a day. But then, you look at the other extreme of the spectrum, you have Elon Musk.
Musk operates on the extreme edge of synchronous efficiency. He manages incredibly complex engineering pipelines across Tesla and SpaceX using aggressive 5-minute micro-time blocking.
5 minutes. The physics of that are mind-boggling. Most people spend 5 minutes just saying hello when adjusting their webcam. How does a 5-minute block actually function?
It functions by entirely eliminating the pleasantries, the idle speculation, and the unstructured brainstorming that plagues most corporate meetings.
Right.
By segmenting his day into precise 5-minute windows, he forces extreme conciseness. An engineer doesn't come into that meeting to discuss how they feel about a project.
They come in with a specific bottleneck, a specific data set, and a specific request for a decision.
Exactly. It strips synchronous communication down to its absolute bare metal.
It's the ultimate enforcement of the budgeted line test we talked about. Every single 5-minute block has a distinct, measurable output.
Precisely.
And then you have Bill Gates, who approached deep work not on a daily level, but on a massive macro scale.
Right. Gates utilized the Think Week. Twice a year, he would entirely remove himself from the Microsoft campus.
Just disappear.
Just disappear. He would isolate himself in a cabin, completely disconnected from email, phone calls, and routine management operations.
To do what?
He used this massive, multi-day, long-horizon, deep work block to do nothing but read dense technical papers, analyze emerging global market shifts, and evaluate Microsoft's long-term product roadmap.
So if I'm synthesizing these examples, the goal for the listener isn't to necessarily force themselves into Elon Musk's 5-minute blocks, which probably cause a nervous breakdown for most people, or to abandon their company for a week in the woods like Bill Gates.
No, do not try to perfectly mimic their specific habits. The takeaway is to internalize the underlying mechanism. Identifying your specific biological peaks and guarding them with intense systematization. Jobs eliminated the friction of wardrobe decisions. Bezos restricted high-stakes choices to his biological peak. Musk eliminated the friction of unstructured meetings.
They all recognize that decision capital is their only true asset.
Exactly. And they design their environments around their physiology, ignoring arbitrary corporate norms.
We've covered the optimal frameworks. We've seen how the legends do it. Now we have to look at the dark side. Because if you ignore these biological realities, if you decide that you are tougher than biology, and you try to run the chaotic 100-hour reactive hustle, there is a very specific, catastrophic end state.
Total systemic failure via burnout.
And we need to be very precise about what burnout actually is because the cultural definition is flawed. People think burnout just means you're tired from working long
The
hours.
clinical reality is much more dangerous. Burnout is the physiological and psychological result of prolonged high effort paired with low control, fragmented focus, and poor recovery.
Let's break that equation down. Prolonged, high effort, low control, poor recovery. That describes the exact state of a founder who is sitting in a noisy open office, context switching between Slack and coding 50 times a day, putting out fires they didn't start, and sleeping 4 hours a night.
Right. They are working incredibly hard, but they have zero control over their attention.
Exactly.
When you operate in that continuous reactive mode, your body perceives it as a continuous threat. Your adrenal system stays chronically elevated, pumping cortisol into your bloodstream all day and all night.
You're just constantly in fight or flight.
Yes. This chronic elevation destroys your ability to achieve deep sleep, severely impairs your cognitive judgment, and leads to profound, cellular-level physical fatigue.
It's terrifying. So how do we stop it?
To combat this biological collapse, the framework outlines the 4 pillars of sustainable performance.
Walk us through these pillars, because this is the ultimate defense mechanism for our listeners.
Pillar 1 is biological recovery. This is non-negotiable. It requires 7 to 8 hours of sleep hygiene, daily physical movement to metabolize stress hormones, and proper nutrition.
You cannot out-hustle a failing biological system.
You really can't. Pillar 2 is psychological detachment.
What does true psychological detachment look like? Because just leaving the office doesn't mean you've detached if you're checking metrics on your phone in bed.
True detachment means establishing a hard, structured end to your workday and severing all work communications.
Literally turning it off.
Yes. This is a biological necessity. Your nervous system requires time away from the stimuli of work to shift from the sympathetic state, fight or flight, into the parasympathetic state, which is rest and digest.
If you never detach, your brain never repairs itself.
Precisely. Pillar 3 is ruthless scope reduction.
Meaning,
This means forcing yourself to prioritize just 1 or 2 key outcomes per day. You have to abandon the delusional 40-item to-do list that only serves to make you feel like you are constantly failing.
I feel attacked by that one, but it's true. And pillar 4,
Pillar 4 is peer advisory.
which addresses the emotional isolation of building a company.
Yes. Entrepreneurship is an incredibly lonely endeavor. You often can't share your deepest fears with your employees or your investors.
You have to wear the brave face.
Right. So surrounding yourself with a network of peers who are facing the exact same structural challenges, like the global networks facilitated by StartupLanes, provides strategic perspective and significantly reduces the emotional strain that accelerates burnout.
To really drive this home, we have to aggressively debunk some of the most toxic myths of startup culture. And the most pervasive, dangerous myth is this idea that sleep is a luxury that founders should sacrifice.
It's the worst one.
I hear this constantly. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Sleep is for the weak.
It is a scientifically illiterate myth that actively destroys enterprise value.
We established that your decision capital is finite. What we haven't discussed is how that capital is regenerated.
Exactly. It happens during deep sleep. During sleep, your brain activates the glymphatic system, which literally flushes neurotoxic metabolic waste, the byproducts of a day of heavy thinking out of your brain tissue.
Like taking out the cellular trash.
Yes. Furthermore, REM sleep is when memory consolidation and lateral pattern recognition occur.
So if you're sleeping 4 hours a night, you are basically waking up with a brain that is still full of toxic metabolic waste, trying to make high-stakes financial decisions.
Yes, sleep deprivation directly mimics the cognitive impairment of alcohol intoxication.
Wow.
You wouldn't let a founder make a critical strategic pivot while drunk, but we culturally applaud them for making that same pivot on 3 hours of sleep.
I think of it like a computer that has been running for 40 days without a reboot. The RAM is completely fragmented, background processes are eating up 99% of the CPU, and the cooling fans are screaming.
That's a perfect image.
You might think, I can't afford the 3 minutes it takes to reboot. But the reality is, every single process is taking 10 times longer than it should because the system is choking on its own garbage. Sleep is the hard reboot.
That is exactly what is happening biologically. The next myth that needs to die is that busyness is the same as productivity.
This goes back to deep work versus shallow work.
Yes. The research states clearly the triage and execution of high-leverage tasks matter exponentially more than empty task activity. Answering 100 trivial emails might feel like you are working hard, but it moves the enterprise forward exactly 0 inches.
And the final myth. A dedicated founder should never take a day off.
Planned rest clears cognitive debt. If you never step away from the micro operations, you lose the lateral perspective required to see the macro picture.
You get lost in the weeds.
You become so obsessed with the bark on the trees that you don't realize the entire forest is on fire. This is why the StartupLanes Framework enforces operational guardrails, like the 2 p.m. decision cutoff.
Remind us how that guardrail works.
It is a strict rule. Never make high-stakes financial, legal, or personnel decisions after 2 p.m.
Period.
Period. Recognize that your decision fatigue has set in. If a major issue arises at 3 p.m., you triage the immediate bleeding in Zone 3, but you defer the final strategic judgment until Zone 1 the next morning when your prefrontal cortex is fully restored.
And pairing that with the Sunday evening reset.
Yes, spending just 20 minutes on Sunday evening mapping out your 3 Zone 1 deep work blocks for the upcoming week. You lock in the strategic architecture before Monday morning's reactive chaos even has a chance to begin.
Dr. Gupta summarizes this entire philosophy with a quote that every founder should have on their desk. He says, "Burnout is not caused by hard work. It is caused by spending endless energy on low-impact, unmeasured tasks."
It's the absolute truth.
Spending endless energy on low-impact, unmeasured tasks. That is so profound, and it brings us full circle right back to the beginning of our deep dive. You cannot manufacture time.
You cannot.
You can't magically create a 25th hour by sheer willpower. The only mechanism you have for growth, the only way to scale your execution, is demand displacement.
Displacing the noise.
You must ruthlessly displace the low-leverage noise, the endless Slack notifications, the 60-minute meetings that could have been a 5-minute update, the agonizing over trivial decisions, and replace it with structured, zone-based, biologically aligned execution.
Moving from chaotic firefighting to structured entrepreneurial execution requires immense emotional discipline. It requires the courage to say no, to lock your door, and to let a few minor fires burn so you can build the main structure.
It's not easy.
No, but as the Stoics understood, and as Aristotle noted, excellence then is not an act, but a habit. The routines we've unpacked today, the 90-minute ultradian blocks, the batched asynchronous communication, the strict WIP limits, these are the mechanical habits of excellence.
So what does this actually mean for you, listening right now, looking at a calendar that is probably already out of control? It means it's time to take control of your cap table.
Time for an audit.
Exactly. Here is your call to action. Tomorrow, I want you to run a context-switching audit on your own calendar. Look honestly at where your focus is being fractured by the noise. And then, I challenge you to block out your very first 90-minute Zone 1 deep work session for the following morning.
Protect it at all costs.
Put your phone on airplane mode, shut down your email, warn your team that you are unreachable, and do the complex, terrifying work that actually moves the needle.
And as you restructure your day, I want to leave you with a final paradigm shift to ponder. We have established empirically that your most vital asset is your decision capital, and that deep restorative sleep is the sole biological mechanism capable of replenishing it.
Right.
If we accept that as fact, does that make a full night's sleep the ultimate, unassailable competitive advantage in modern business?
That's a great question.
Consider how many of your competitors are actively, voluntarily sabotaging their own empires just by setting their alarm clock for 4 a.m. to answer shallow emails in the dark.
Just to feel productive.
Let them exhaust their CPUs, let them fragment their RAM. While they grind themselves into a state of cognitive impairment, you can wake up fully recovered with maximum decision capital, ready to execute with absolute clarity.
Protect your calendar as fiercely as you protect your cap table. Displace the demand. We'll see you on the next deep dive.